All right, let's do this. Peanut, if you're staying in the room, no talking. Hello, and welcome to the PhotoWork podcast, the talky and touchy-feely version of my book, PhotoWork, 40 Photographers on Process and Practice. Hello, everyone. I'm Sasha Wolf, recording from Woodstock, New York, and joined as usual by my friend and producer, Mr. Michael Chauvin-Dalton. Hello, Michael.
Hello. Good morning. We're recording in the morning.
We are recording in the morning. It's a rainy Sunday morning up here.
Yeah,
but
same here.
I'm not mad at that. It's okay. I have chores to do and easier to buckle down when
it's true.
The weather's not beckoning me off on some adventure. So
that's right. Yep.
And I was at the climbing gym yesterday, and
nice.
Then a wonderful party in the late afternoon. So I had a fun time yesterday. So
I took my son to a friend's birthday party where they did laser tag.
Paintball and laser tag are not in my repertoire. Although I have to say, I think it looks fun. But,
they have a blast. It's one of those places where it's set up like, fake little towns and things like that, and they just chase each other through little alleyways and roadways and things. Yes.
There's certain things that are meant for young people that I have to say,
absolutely.
I'm a little envious of. That's one of them. The other is, I know adults can do this, but I haven't done it yet. But I miss go-karts. That's a part of my childhood that I really miss. I want to go go-karting.
One of the advantages of having children is you get to do children things
totally.
with them.
Absolutely. Without just being without being just like some strange grown adult showing up.
That's right. You just have to decide how much you want to beat them at those games.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yes. Yeah, interpersonal dynamics come into
That's
it.
right.
Yeah. Familial dynamics. That's hilarious. Yeah.
Difference between competitiveness and humiliation. Yes.
Right. Oh my gosh. Just taking your child out on the course.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, we have a very full show today, so let me just get into a couple announcements. I want to just give a shout out to our good friends, Picture House in the Small Dark Room. I was at an event recently with Claudia and Richard, who are the co-owners of Picture House and friends of ours. They do a lot with the foundation, as I think our listeners know. And they actually mentioned to me wanting to get the word out more on their preservation and archival services. So, scanning, digitizing archival material, it's something they're really set up to do. And I actually thought of another colleague who needs a lot of that done. So I connected them. So many artists right now are using archival material. And so I thought I would mention to our listeners that they can look to Picture House for that type of work, as well as the usual incredible processing and printing that they do.
And if you're sort of unfamiliar with how that all works, they'll do a consultation with you and let you know all the options and how to figure it all out. So it's really nice to have a professional do this work for you.
Yeah, and also just a reminder that, the folks at Picture House, it's a very personal experience there, even though it's a very robust space. And that's one of the things that I love about those guys and sending people over there is that although it is not a small little atelier, it's they got a few floors.
That's right.
going. And I think this is, Claudia and Richard's vision for it, right? How personal it is and that they know everyone. And,
it's literally a living room you walk into.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, it's awesome. All right. So some love for those guys. And so today's show is really fascinating. It's a conversation with the photographer, curator, artist, Justine Kurland, and her good friend and collaborator. Over many years, they've worked on things together and formed this really amazing, I think, friendship, but also intellectual bond, if I can say that, Marina Chao. And They just opened this huge exhibition up at CPW. It's called The Rose. It explores collage as feminist form and strategy through the work of 57 artists, dating from the 1960s through the present. And I saw it. It's incredible. It's a really immersive experience. Anyway, what did you think of the episode?
Yeah, I had 3 big takeaways, and you just mentioned one of them, the bond between Justine and Marina. It's such a privilege to be able to work with someone the way they work with each other, where they believe in what each other's doing. Mm-hmm. And I think that they really feed off of that. And that comes through in the episode very clearly. And the other thing that comes through in the way that they talk about the work as this sort of tool of survival, you really come away with this idea that they really believe in the power of the work.
Yeah, absolutely.
That there is this ability to create work that helps you sort of get through the world and deal with the world. And then towards the end, you and Justine have a very interesting conversation about legibility in work that might be considered more straightforward and work that might be considered more conceptual. And I'm not going to give anything away about that, but that's a really great conversation.
Yeah. Well, let me just read one other thing, just because it's related to how you described part of the conversation and the urgency of the work. This is from the description in the little beautiful booklet they made for the show. The Rose is also a provocation. It asks us to consider the mechanics of collage, ripping things apart and mending things back together, as a template for forging new social and political structures. It urges us to honor revision and reprisal as correctives for the skewed lenses that distort our worldview. So it is a very political show, with some of the pieces, or many of them, very much on the surface, some a little bit more with more subtlety, some with humor, but it's really fascinating. So yes, I really encourage people to come up to CPW in Kingston and see this just huge show of 57 artists. I mean, it's really something you could spend the day enjoying.
And if that's out of your realm of visiting CPW, there's a book coming out.
That's
right. The Rose, A Circular Genealogy of Collage, curated by Justine Kurland. Now, the publication date is in July at some point. There's pre-orders available. We found a pre-order on Amazon for September, but that book is on the way. They had a book talk and event on June 14th with some advanced copies. So the book is definitely on the way.
Landed, yeah. Well, look out for that. Anyway, let's get to it because it's sort of a longer episode. Michael, if you don't mind, please take it away.
My pleasure. And here's your conversation with Justine Kurland and Marina Chao.
Justine Kurland, Marina Chao, welcome to the PhotoWork podcast. It's so great to have both of you on. I've really been looking forward to spending time with you both, especially after seeing your incredible exhibition that you co-curated, The Rose, over at the Center for Photography Woodstock in Kingston the other day. It was really an incredible experience. So welcome to you both.
Thank you for having us, Sasha.
Thank you so much.
So as we do with every episode, I really love to start with the artist's or the guest's biography. I think it's really important, helpful, and also just fun to just know a bit about the guests. One thing I sort of realized early on is that, folks can really love an artist and have all their photo books or whatnot and actually not know anything about the person beyond their work. And for some people, some people like it that way, but I think it's really nice to share, fill in some of those blanks about where one was raised and where they grew up, when they got into art, or photography, and so on. So, Justine, why don't you start and tell us about your journey?
Sure. God, how far back should I go?
Yeah, go back to the beginning.
Okay. Both of my parents were artists. They actually met at the Art Students League in New York. They were both painters. They got divorced very early in my life. I think I was 2 or 3. My mother was a single mom with 3 kids and left making artwork in order to support us and started doing Renaissance fair. She started sewing clothing because it was something she could do at home while she was single mothering, and would go on these road trips with us, pulling us out of school sometimes in order to sell this clothing that she was making at these Renaissance fairs, which is, she was not Renaissance fair enthusiast, but it was just this kind of niche market where she was able to find her way. So I actually think that is a really important part of my story of like, you know, being on the road, understanding the family as an extension of labor, understanding what it meant to use art as a form of expression, a form of world building, a form of creating maybe some alternative to, you know, the status quo. My mother was very wild. She, you know, wore turbans and beaded earrings and would like walk around with naked underneath like a vintage fur coat. She was like, you know, grew pot in our house that I was like, when I was a kid, I was so worried that she was going to get arrested because the pot was in the front window of our house that I used to secretly pour Clorox bleach onto her pot plants so that they would die. And it was a little bit terrifying, actually, to have a mother who was such an iconoclast and was really, you know, wanted to do things her own way. And so, yeah, I mean, I think I found my way to photography in high school when a girl that I had a crush on was really an avid photographer, and I just wanted to do everything that she did. And so I started taking photographs and fell in love with photographs and actually used those photographs to photograph her and these other women. And, you know, I was making street photographs. It was this kind of an amazing tool that traveled with me in my life in all sorts of different capacities before I found my own, you know, visual vocabulary and language, which is constantly changing, I guess. So I guess it's not about finding, it's not about the arrival, but yeah, it's been a journey.
Where was this, Justine? Were you in New York City?
So I was born outside of Buffalo, New York. We lived in a small town near Syracuse. Oh, excuse me. We lived in Buffalo until I was about 7, moved to this small town. I lived there from 7 to 15. And when I was 15, I left my mother and moved in with my aunt and went to high school in New York and been based in New York City ever since.
And Marina, how about you? What's your journey been?
Oh, well, I love hearing those stories about Justine. I came to photography more traditional through school. I mean, it wasn't at all expected. I went to college sort of thinking I was going to be pre-med based on really nothing except, I think, my parents' hopes and wishes. And then I took an art history class, kind of fell in love with it, so eventually became an art history major. And then afterwards, didn't really know what to do with that degree, which probably seems familiar to a lot of people listening, maybe. And so I went straight into graduate school, which is like another, looking back at it, probably bad idea. But through, I don't know, luck and timing and whatever, I ended up, I did an art history curatorial studies program in the city. And then after that, I started working. My first job was a 1-year internship at MoMA in the Department of Photography. So that was very lucky. And I kind of went on from there. And before that, photography and video was what I had written on for my thesis, but it wasn't, I kind of learned everything that I knew. So my sort of background in photography is very informed by MoMA. And then from there, went to ICP, and now I'm at CPW.
So, well, tell us a little bit about being at ICP and what sort of, work you did there. And I think people are, just as interested in hearing from people, who make up different parts of our ecosystem and the photo world. So tell people about, what you did at ICP and what that experience was like.
There I was ICP was where I got to take everything I learned at MoMA, I think, and MoMA is a very specific place to work, a great place to work, but it's very sort of vertically integrated. Everybody has, there's a lot of support there, and it's great. That is sort of a very ideal environment to work in as a curator. And then when I went to ICP, it was different. Same in a lot of ways, of course. We're all colleagues. So it's not that. It was just a little scrappier, smaller.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, and you had to do, and I was then sort of still helping other curators with their shows, but I was at ICP for a long enough time, maybe, almost 7 years, that's where I kind of transitioned to doing my own projects, which is a big important shift for any curator. And I liked that perspective that moving between those two institutions gave me.
What was your first show that you headed up curatorially at ICP?
The first show that I did entirely, that was really my show and not like a bigger collaboration, because I worked with Pauline Vermeer and Charlotte Cotton on a project too. But the first thing that I did by myself was a group show of 10 women artists called Multiply, Identify, Her, which I really enjoyed. It was a show about multiplicity and identity and sort of the way that, I never really had a great elevator pitch for this show, even though I spent a lot of time with it and I really care about it a lot. And I kind of like that about it. It's like very hard for me even now still to have a good way of describing it. But it ranged from everything from collage, paper collage, to multi-part portraiture, to projects related to AI, and it was sort of just talking about this arc of representation by women artists and a lot of it self-representation, and talking about multiplicity and kind of the figure of the cyborg and these ways of presenting yourself that are like strategies for survival, keeping representation fluid and multifaceted. And I feel like Justine also.
I just wanted to jump in.
She was there. She was at the opening.
Yeah, I was at the opening, and I feel like the show Multiply, Identify, Her was such an important way of looking at these different code switching, this different multiple consciousnesses that we occupy, these different ways that collage really, that we patch together from all of these inherited stereotypes, from all of these like constructed parameters of our ability to socialize in the world. All of this, it's like working the trap, right? Like in a Judith Butler, like how can we even move or live or breathe? Like that show was so important, so amazing. And I really feel like that show and the show that me and Marina curated together are like sister shows. I really feel like it's this kind of same idea that art fundamentally is about world building, is about creating space,
Yeah, opening up, I think, these kinds of like, instead of the unified singular, right, sort of trying to break free of that, like more than, and I think photography and collage and video is so good at that, sort of representing something that's really an aspiration, right? How do we get out of this body and the way and all the things that it socially defines us ultimately? And I think that's a good point. Just that's exactly, I think that's maybe when we, this is many years of, that show was 2018, this is many years of us talking about these things. And I think that was maybe the beginning of like this long conversation.
It definitely was. I mean, we both taught together at ICP Bard's MFA program. And then the part of the bio that you skipped over, which was the period of time in 2020 where you were a partner, before you came to CPW, where you were a partner at Higher Pictures. And I feel like so much of my growth as an artist and moving away from photography and into collage was so supported by Marina's actual ability to put into words. Like the press release from my first show of SCUMB Manifesto, which was where I had moved away from photographs and cut up my library of photo books. Marina wrote that press release. I don't know, there's something when someone is able to put into words everything that you're thinking that is just like, it was like a really important for me to be able to see Marina's show before I even started making collage. Like there's just this real shift in my thinking from, where what I didn't say in my bio is like there's a very formal education I received at Yale in the 90s with this photographic modernism, Todd Papageorge giving 3-hour lectures on Eugene Atget, and what photography was supposed to be, this very, very narrow gauntlet of what a photograph is, which is to say that a photograph is a representation of three-dimensional space put into two-dimensional space, animated through photographic form, right? That's like the crux of his Atget essay, which, is pretty limited when we think about the harm photography has done and the possibilities of repair that photography still has to do. And I think Marina is someone who represents to me a very radically different way of thinking about the possibility of photography's potential. So that's like, I can't even say enough about Marina's influence on my thinking.
That's really incredible. I mean, I knew that, Marina, that you were at Higher Pictures during this time, but I didn't know about the exhibition at ICP that you curated, and that this dialogue, in some ways, either literally or in some way, just in terms of influence and kinship and feeling. Justine, as you were starting to do the SCUMB Manifesto work, that there was someone there who had already sort of gone down this path of thinking about these same concerns. I mean, that's really wonderful.
I also want to give a shout out also to Kim Boris, who was not only my gallerist at that time, now my ex, but in 2016, we started dating, which was a hugely eye-opening experience of really examining what the photographic canon meant, what it meant for people of color, what it meant for women, what it meant for queer artists, and these very difficult conversations that she so patiently had with me, you know, really discussing and really helping me untangle some of the entrenched ideas that I had. You know, so for me, there's the real journey of getting there is not about my mother in the fur coat. The real journey is people like Marina, people like Kim Boris. And then I really have to, you know, in relationship to this exhibition, the Rose started at the Lumber Room in Portland, Oregon, which is an art space that was founded by a woman named Sarah Miller Meigs, who has done tremendous work supporting artists of color, women, queer artists, and really has put so much resources and used her platform to shift what the dialogue is on how we build culture. And to think about that people like Marina or Kim or Sarah, that it's not just the artist or even just the curator that is building. It's like, it's you, Sasha. It's your giving your platform to us to speak. It's like how we're all doing things together, which is, you know, the very point of collage is the ability to collaborate, to work together.
Well, that's a beautiful, that's a really beautiful idea. And I, know that it's been put into effect with this exhibition in an incredibly bold, really dynamic, all sort of encompassing way. When you walk into the space, the exhibition space at CPW, I did see some of the exhibition from the lumberyard. Is that
the lumber room? It's called the lumber room.
Lumber room.
Yeah.
See, I wanted to say
that's an old-fashioned. That's an old-fashioned phrase. I just learned about this. I think it might have come from Virginia Woolf, but it's an old-fashioned phrase, the lumber room, that means like the attic, but maybe in a more metaphoric terms of the place of thinking, or
That I like that.
Yeah, and it's an incredible space.
I was thinking of
also
it very
the lumber
literally.
room before, like the lumber room has been around for now 15 years and has these exhibitions. So the exhibition right before the first iteration of the Rose was a solo show of Nona Faustine, who has recently passed, which is a great loss to the art community. And, we mourn her.
No, absolutely. Thank you for saying that. Yeah, I saw a lot of the, installation pictures from the lumber room, but obviously, well, not obviously, but I wasn't there. I didn't see the show in person, but this exhibition at CPW is just really full on. And so let's talk about it. I'm so fascinated by. It feels like there's so much work out there that you could choose from. I'm sure you had to make some very painful decisions, because at a certain point you have to just, space isn't infinite at CPW or any other exhibition space. So how do you, just practically speaking, talk us through a bit how you start and how you finish putting together something like this? And please talk about the show, because we haven't really gotten into the specifics of it. So.
Yeah. No, for sure. I mean, I think Marina can speak to this more about what a curator does. I don't really know what a curator does. But for myself, I feel like one of the things, being now 55 years old, one of the things that's very exciting to me is to see what other artists are making and to see the cross conversations between what I want to think about or look at or feel and what other people are making. And also just to set the stage, like, I don't know, like, when this recording will be heard, what state the United States will be in, but like, let's not forget that we are at war right now. Like, we are in the middle of a civil war. Our government is being dismantled. Our president has usurped, like, beyond the reach of his power, has been taking money away from the arts, away from education, away from health, in order to pay for bombs to drop on children in Gaza. Like, that is where we are. So the feeling of urgency for me around what it is to bring artists together in a amplified call to action has this really important, it's like, it's the only thing I know how to do to fight what's happening. And I really am deeply feel and care, and the themes and the premise around this world building is not just like a fairy tale fantasy of la la la. It is about survival. It is about how the most precarious people are 3 more inches underwater, So that's what the show is coming out of. And that's what the conversations in 2021, when the show we first started talking about it, me and Sarah Meigs, it was about what art can do, how art can be political tool of activism, and the ways that collectors, institutions, publishing, podcasts, curators, and artists can all come together around these most urgent crises that we're facing. So that's a heavy.
No, that's no, Justine, that's really important. I think that your sense of urgency, which obviously has gotten more intense from 2021 to now, is very moving and very important. For me, there's a place for people to make different types of work, whether it's our mutual friend Ray Meeks, who's up here, and I mention Ray because I have 2 Ray Meeks photographs right next to me, and I'm lucky to just, when I'm feeling a certain way, be able to look up and see his beautiful, odd, strange landscape picture I have here next to me. That's a very Ray landscape. And then work like SCUMB Manifesto, or work like, Highway Kind, or, there's room for people to express, I think, ultimately in our community, love and caring and a sense of pain that a lot of us feel, particularly now in different ways. But I think that the intensity and urgency of this exhibition is a very important part of that balance on, one end of the spectrum. So I think, we're all very grateful to you and Marina's intensity and commitment to this call to community and love and caring.
I wanted to call out to Marina because, there's all sorts of, Marina used the word strategies of survival, and there's all sorts of ways of survival, or all sorts of ways of kind of shoring up our strength. The show started at the Lumber Room, curated by me with Sarah Meigs and Libby Warble, all curated it together, going through this very amazing, extensive collection that is the basis of the Lumber Room. So half of the works in the show are housed in the collection of the Lumber Room. But when it came to CPW, and Marina agreed to co-collaborate in this whole idea of a kind of iterative process, Marina brought so much different vibes into the room. And I'm specifically thinking about the humor of a lot of the pieces that she added. Marina, do you want to talk about that maybe?
Yeah, I'll talk about the humor. Then I also wanted to maybe go back a little bit to what you guys were saying before about strategies of survival and protector. Anyway, first the humor. Yeah, I added this work by Pippa Garner called Pubic's Cube, which is upon on the Rubik's Cube, and it's a little cubic sculpture covered in pubic hair. And I think it's, it's just kind of, Pippa Garner is known for looking at sort of commodity culture and that kind of thing with this really absurdist I, right? So we're looking at sort of the absurdity of the way that we live our lives day to day and what we consume. And I think that the Rubik's Cube is just, I don't know, it's just something that's about this absurd nature that's inherent to collage and assemblage. So it's, it's punk, it's disruptive, it's iconoclastic, and all these things, the way that collage is inherently, right? This tearing up, this like smashing together. And it's world building, it's aspirational, and part of that nature is the absurdity. So I liked that Pippa's work is that. And then there was also Gina Osterloh's video piece, Prick, that's playing on the big screen in the center. And it's this performance where somebody is there yelling these actions, right? So cut, slice, and she's in this unitard and walks up to this paper, layers of paper, as you'll see, because she'll walk up to it and she'll start this like screen, right, of paper, and she'll start performing those actions with a knife. And eventually, the yelling gets really loud and it's prick, 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 and she kind of like busts through, births herself through this skein of paper. And she does this in this completely deadpan way, but it's, and it's quite violent sounding at a certain point because that the shouting of the action gets really loud and frantic. And then the culmination of that is just she busts through. And I think it's ultimately just very, very funny. But that's in a lot of the work that was in the show too. It's just these kinds of echoes. And I think what I wanted to say was that when you were talking about, and Justine won't say this about herself, but she's like created this incredible, incredible network of artists and curators and writers and poets who I think, I don't know, Justine, maybe this is a jump. I was thinking about Shayla Miller's piece, Obsidian, and it's like this, I don't know, like a amulet or something, some kind of thing that's imbued with this protective power. And I think that your community that you've built, and it's like, if we just look at it through this show, is really that, right? You're saying like, absolutely, that we're living in this really horrendous time. And it feels like, I don't know, all these people like-minded people that you've collected around you and support all the time. I mean, she's like, you can hear the way she really speaks so kindly about our collaboration and generously about it. She's done this for so many people. All these young artists that you support with shows, even in your studio space and classes. Yes and no, but I imagine this is just like this, and in many, in numbers, we're really stronger, right? So I like that idea of it, just like as the rose iterates, as it rolls along, as you collect collaborators and friends and students, and as it goes on and as it builds, I think it really becomes something very strong and like protective for all of us, right?
No, I don't
know.
No, I'm going to keep going. I want to follow up on that, Justine, just because I think that, folks in our community, which is quite large, and I consider, the community is everywhere, right? We're a scrappy group, us fine art photo people. We have, I think about this all the time, and I say it on the podcast a lot, the wonderful nature of things like portfolio reviews and these, festivals and fairs. I don't mean art fairs, but I mean gatherings where there are workshops and talks, and it's such a huge part of the photo world that I really love. It's like every time I do one of these things, I feel like it's like a camp reunion. I just get to see so many people I adore. And I think everyone knows, Justine, that you have become an incredible advocate for other artists. And I want to ask you, I'm sorry we're embarrassing you, but I just think it's just really moving and important. And I want to ask you, I know you've always been supportive of other artists in your career, but it really feels like a mission now. And was there just a particular time when you?
Yeah, I don't think I've always been supportive of other artists in my life. I think as a young artist, I had a lot of hubris and drive to go and express my own world or what I needed. And Girl Pictures, funnily enough, is about creating community, right? So it's like what I've always craved is this sense of belonging and to be part of a world that can accept me and love me and care for me. That's all I've ever wanted in my life. I mean, if you want to go back to my childhood, like that's, that's where it starts. And it wasn't until, I've always had a community of other artists that I've been friends with and shared ideas with. But it wasn't really until I was with my ex at Higher Pictures where I really understood like what that program, for instance, did in changing the very language of photography, like, you know, like giving LaToya Ruby Frazier her first show. And that little shift in like actually where we place our value and attention seems so important because so many of these, like the places where we come together, whether it's, you know, as our like kind of small photo nerd community, you know, like I've always printed at my own color darkroom and I love Gerard, and there's like, you know, these little, I think it was Nelson Chang who described my own color lab as a barber shop. You know, it used to be you'd put your print in and you'd have 4 minutes for it to come out on the other end. So all the photographers would like kind of talk about their lenses and stuff and trade stories or like, you know, like a barber shop. But the thing that changed for me really, I mean, it started when I started teaching in 2007 is when I started teaching. But it really, when I started teaching, I was teaching from this kind of point of like, oh, I better tell them all about everything that I learned. And it wasn't until, I think, you know, working with Galen Blake at ICP Bard, meeting Marina, and then a few years later, meeting Kim Burris and my understanding of what the program and how Higher Pictures worked. And because I was dating someone who ran a gallery, I got to learn like, oh, this is what a press release looks like. This is how you can create, you know, I learned a lot and I learned to change hats, you know. So I think that actually one of the most valuable and important things for any artist to know is to be able to wear all of these different hats, to be able to be a collector, to be able to host a show, to be able to make a zine of someone else's work, to be able to do all of these different things, because in doing that, it breaks this kind of power hierarchical systems whereby there's the content and then there's the platform, and that they don't speak to each other and that you're just kind of plugged in. But if we want to actually have radical change, then we have to be able to move around and not have this kind of cult of the genius artist that like knows everything, you know, or that centers themselves, or that it's all about this one person's work. It's not. It's about how we all are collaborating together. So I guess when I talk about like my advocating for younger artists, I'm not trying to be like modest about what I do, because I work really hard and I'm very proud of the work that I do. But what I'm saying about that is it's a group effort, and that those artists trust me, and that it's not me lifting them up, they lift me up as well, and that they are my platform as much as I'm their platform, and that it is a kind of it's a collage. It's another collage. It's an interweaving of our skill sets, and it's a skill share, and it's experimental. And I want to go back to like the actual artist in the show, because I think Shayla Miller is a really important example of what it means to like Obsidian, the character that is this kind of speculative narrative at the basis of this series that she made, is a superhero that is a palimpsest. She imagines there's a historian that goes back in time and finds a comic book, and the comic book is about this superhero who is also a supervillain, who takes all of her anger at, you know, racial injustice and oppression and domination and white supremacy, and channels all of the rage into this crystallized, what did you call it, Marina? In one of the pieces, she's holding this obsidian.
Yeah. I think I called it amulet. I don't know what else you would call it, but yeah. Or a crystal.
Yeah. But it's like, it's this thing that's actually happens by like kind of in collage, where the margins are then centered, and there's so much power and strength in channeling together the rage, the passion, the desire all together to kind of bust forward. So if I were to sit here and be like, yeah, I've put this show together, then I wouldn't be talking about Sarah and Libby and Marina and Kim and all of these other people who have come together for this. It would be nothing. It's all about like this kind of everyone coming in together. And Shayla is someone who she writes. She's well known as a singer under the name Freddie June. She is a video artist. She makes photographs. Like, she's wearing all of these hats. She's a baker. You know, it's not like this kind of idea of this rarefied specialty, you know. There's so many kind of examples of the different artists in the show that are embodying through their process and the work that they're making, the whole thinking for me about how I want to model my own participation and collaboration as an artist. There's 57 artists in the show. There's so many amazing
no,
artists.
there are. It's a big show. The thing I remain curious about is how you find these artists. And, I doubt, or maybe you did know of all 57 artists ahead of time, but I assume there was some
there was lots of discoveries
along the way.
Yeah.
And how does that happen? What's that pathway?
Well, I was talking to Marina about this earlier because I wanted to know if it was normal for curators to work like this. When I started talking to Sarah Miller Meigs about the show and about what collage had meant to me and why I had moved away from straight photography into cutting up my photo books, I had really specific ideas about it. It started when I was asked by the Whitney to talk about Andy Warhol, and I'm not a huge fan of Andy Warhol, but it was Lynn Tillman who invited me, and I am a huge, huge fan of Lynn Tillman, so I couldn't say no to Lynn Tillman. And I, through Andy Warhol, got to Valerie Solanas. And Valerie Solanas has a manifesto called Society of Cutting Up Men, SCUMB. So I started cutting up my photo books with the Society of Cutting Up Men's books. And it was really an important action for me to free psychic space on my library. I have a huge amount of photo books. And when I was talking about my ex, Kim Boris, when we started dating, she used to call my library my manberry because like 90% of my books were by white men. And so it was this very practical effort to create space on my bookshelves in order to house the books of other people, other artists, other voices. And so there was something about breaking from the canon that seemed inherent to collage. And there was something about taking the stuff that would cause harm in the world and reauthoring it and changing the perspective. So I got very obsessed with Jay DeFeo and this idea of iteration. Jay DeFeo is an artist out of San Francisco making work in the 70s alongside Bruce Conner and Wallace Berman, who is famously known for this painting that is now housed at the Whitney called The Rose, which is, what the show is titled after, where for 8 years, ladling house paint mixed with mica with a teaspoon, she made this ginormous painting of basically a portal, this circular space that had in its lifetime had this kind of iterative process. First, it was called the Death Rose. And when it was called the Death Rose, it had much more angular kind of crystalline shape. And then it was called the White Rose, where it was really frilly for a little while. And finally, its last incarnation as the Rose, which was some kind of balance between this kind of geometric shape and the organic shapes. After she made this piece, it had to be cut out of her Fillmore Street studio. Bruce Conner made this incredible film of it. It looks like it's being birthed out of this window. And there's this incredible shots inside of the studio. There's another piece that she made that was called Estacado, where she was just like in the same way she made the rose. She was just kind of layering this kind of accretion layer after layer after layer in her on the wall. So it's kind of like the inside of like a uterus lining as it's like building up before menstruation or something. It's like this really incredible cave-like studio that the rose is birthed out of. So I was really interested in this idea of circularity, of iteration, of rotation, of value coming from the force of our attention, and the idea that one thing can be turned into something else. After she did the rose, Jay DeFeo started making photographs, Xeroxes, and collages, these very ephemeral light works where one, like a broken cup, would be photographed, and then she would collage that photograph and later paint from the collage. She created her own vocabulary by moving things around in these different mediums. She called them member objects. So I was thinking about collage in this form of like a kind of a violence of the action of cutting, ripping, rending, breaking apart, but that also calls for a reparative act of gluing, healing, suturing, sewing, bringing back together. But the thing about the Jay DeFeo rose and the thing that I was really interested in for me is this idea of the vagina, and not just as an essentialist biological anatomy. The writer Paul Preciado, this trans writer, has said that every body has 25 vaginas. But this idea that we embody and that our bodies are kind of portals of understanding the world. I mean, for instance, there's a piece in the show by Barbara Hammer that's a later work of Barbara Hammer's that is dealing with cancer, with her breast cancer that ultimately was the reason for the cause of her death. And so it's a very real idea of looking at the precarity of the body, looking at the body being attacked by a disease. But when you look at that work also in context to who Barbara Hammer is and the work that she has done as a queer artist, making visibility for queer identity, for queer life, for queer survival and livability, the idea of cancer takes on another type of form of what is foreign, what is invasive, what you fight against, what you then maybe move through to become some other kind of another kind of hybrid of your body being both strengthened and weakened by the things that would attack it. I don't know if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. In a way, when I'm talking about the vagina in space, I'm talking about the way that the body is a porous thing. And when I say the body, I'm talking about the way we experience culture, politics, how we interface and interconnect with each other, our interconnectedness. I don't know if any of that makes sense. Marina, can you help me?
I think all of that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I think it all made sense. Marina, I have a question for you following up on that somewhat. Do you guys, whatever, talk at all about the legibility of the show from a female identifying position versus a male identifying position? Do you guys think about that at all? Or even the legibility of the work in general, the difference? I mean, you can answer this however you want. I'm curious about both things. But the difference between, Justine, say, the work you've been most known for before you did SCUMB Manifesto, before you started doing collage, more straight ahead type of photography, and the difference between the legibility of that work versus some of the more difficult to read collage work. But I'm also curious about it from a sort of gender standpoint, how you guys think about it.
Wait, what do you mean legibility? And what work is more difficult?
Well, I just wonder, I think some of the collage work has a density, literally, quite literally, is in some ways harder to read. You can look at a sort of straight ahead photograph and it's pretty easy to agree on what we're seeing, what the description is in the photograph. Some of the collage is harder to penetrate, even not just as far as possible meanings, but also just as far as, wait, what am I seeing there? What is that? Mm-hmm. What am I looking at? It can be more challenging. And so I wonder about how you think about that. And I also have wondered if you guys ever sort of discussed how women or men might approach the work differently.
I guess I'm not that interested in that difference. I feel like that difference maybe, I just saw this Instagram post where Judith Butler, it was a Judith Butler quote on Instagram. I'm quoting Instagram on your podcast. Sorry, Sasha. Where she said that there are only two genders.
No, it's okay.
Judith Butler says there's only two genders, fascism and anti-fascism, which I really love. So I feel like in 2025, if a man doesn't understand a woman's perspective, then he has been doing a lot of work to keep his head in the ground,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I think it would be actually accurate.
But I mean, I think there's things about what you're saying about legibility I really think is super interesting. And I think this ties back into Marina's show, Identify, Multiply Her, of what it is to have to code switch, to have to
readable,
to have to exist in multiple identities at once, to assimilate, to camouflage, to divert white supremacy, to not get picked up by the police. And then there's another thing about legibility. I'm looking at Lindsay Buckman's work where she's making work about this area of Southern California that is an area that has been used for agriculture, that water has been brought into the desert to grow these oranges and other industrial farms, that is all based on immigrant labor. So there's like all of these different levels where you could walk into a landscape. We might look at a Ray Meeks landscape and think like, oh, what beautiful light hitting this gorgeous tree and what an interesting form. But like, there's no tabula rasa landscape. You know, there's very few patches of ground in the United States.
Absolutely.
So this idea of our thinking that we have legibility, that we can understand things is, for me, the very problem. Because usually when we talk about legibility, and especially when we talked about gendered legibility, then we are kind of absorbing these insidious biases that are, you know, like every time we say the date, every time we say it's 2025, we're basically agreeing that, you know, Jesus is our Lord and Savior. You know, so there's all of these ways that language and our understanding of things they carry this baggage with them. Tara Cranek, for instance.
I was going to say talk more about that, because I think this is absolutely right, and I think it's really important.
Yeah.
And I know, as someone who made a lot of pictures out in the United States, across the country, that I know that this is something that's important to you as far as whose land it was, and also the backstory on, you know, the building of the railroads and all of that. So yeah, please talk more about it.
I was going to talk about Tara Cranek, for instance. So like, there are themes in the show, and one of the kind of major through lines of the show are artists who are making archival interventions, who are taking existing pictures from, you know, magazines, from different photographic archives. Tara is someone who was born in Peru, adopted into the United States, and her biological mother was an indigenous woman during a time where there was a coup in Peru. Her mother was probably raped. You know, this kind of like, all of these kind of politics impacted the circumstances of her life. So as a 30-something-year-old, she goes back to Peru and she finds an archive of photographs from a now defunct magazine that they had these like stock photographs. And then sometimes they were journalistic photographs, but she's using both of these images where she is projecting these images that were all photographed in the year of her birth in 1979. She projects them and rephotographs herself in the projected light of those images. So she's like time traveling through this act of photographing. And when she makes these pictures, she just did this whole performance of the making of the context sheet 1979 at ICP in the show that Keisha Scarville and Elizabeth Sherman and Sarah curated. So Keisha is another artist in the show who has really important ways of intervening and disrupting and creating speculative collages out of these archival pictures of her father. But to go back to Tara, she makes the photographs in situ. So she sets up the projection. She has her camera there in the gallery. She is, you know, loading sheet film. She makes the pictures and then she processes the film all on site that then end up becoming these photographs that are a record of this performance of her crossing time and in crossing time kind of thinking about these kind of parallel possibilities, opening up this kind of continuum between what was and what could have been. So that's just kind of one example.
So you mentioned Keisha Scarville, who was a guest on the podcast. I loved talking to her. She's such a lovely person and an incredible artist, incredibly thoughtful. And she has this really amazing series of reappropriated, it's not really a word, but anyway, passport photographs of her father. Marina, can you tell us about that? Because it's a really beautiful section, and where it's placed in the exhibition, et cetera, is really central and wonderful. And can you tell us about that work?
Yeah, I mean, Keisha, I was lucky enough. I'm so sorry. I don't know why when I first was doing my bio, I think I just wanted to keep it really short. I didn't mention like really formative, important years at Higher Pictures, Generation Higher Pictures with Kim and Janice. I learned a ton. I learned a ton in such a concentrated amount of time. And I think before working in that area, I really had, when we were talking about the ecosystem before of the photo world, I always knew that it was a really intense and difficult job. But when I was there, like it really struck me. And that's, I think, how I learned so much in a short amount of time. It's so intense. So I really have a whole new appreciation for that part of the ecosystem. But Keisha, so I really was lucky enough to work with Keisha at Higher Pictures, and that's how I got to know her, even though, we had been at ICP at the same time in different areas for years. But passports it's such a beautiful project. I mean, she's been making these since 2012, and it's kind of more of a meditative, ritualistic kind of practice. So she has these slightly enlarged copies of her father's first passport. So their family is Guyanese, but she was born and raised in Brooklyn, but she grew up going back and forth and talks a lot about liminality and being sort of 1 foot in, 1 foot out of American culture, and going back and forth to Guyana all the time. So in any case, these works, these passport works, which there are like 300 some odd pictures, and she's still making them. It's just like a continuous thing that she does. She collages directly onto these copies of her father's passport photograph. So he's a young man there, and she does all kinds of, it's amazing to see. Higher Pictures did a show just earlier this spring, and people should all read to the press release that Carla Williams, another amazing artist, wrote about the work. But it's incredible. It's all about this kind of like, which a lot of collage is, right? About this attention and care to the image, or what the image represents, or the image you're trying to build. It's like time in the hand. And she goes and she has to sit there with like a little loop, like a magnifier, because she's like gluing glitter, individual beads, collaging. She has some works that are really about the face and about masking. And then there are others that are just really like fantastic. Make me think of the Lorna Simpson collages that are in the show too, where she's, imagining hair made with this beautiful blue watercolor, and other images that are maybe more overtly political in terms of what she's collaging onto there. Some things that are anthropological studies. They're really so beautiful, but all about this kind of way of connecting with her father.
Yeah, it's really fantastic and mesmerizing. You mentioned Carla Williams wrote for Keisha, but is also has, I think, I don't know if it's more than one, but has at least one piece in the show as well, right?
She has a grid.
Yeah, like a series.
There's a grid of 12, yeah.
She has a grid.
12.
Right. I love Carla. She was on the show as well. And love hearing, I actually just heard her speak recently at Bard, and it's so wonderful to hear her speak. She's fantastic. Well, we've got to wrap up, but I wish we could name everyone, but Gwen Smith, Olivia Reevy, Kate Hardy, Jackie Marshall. There's so many, Janice Guy, Natalie Ball, Carla Williams, who we just mentioned, Mary Beth Adelson, so many, Francesca Woodman, Jessica Jackson Hutchins, Barbara Hammer, who I think you mentioned earlier, so many incredible artists in this exhibition. And I urge folks to travel if you can. But if not, there will be a book coming out, I think, shortly. Is that correct?
Yes.
Of the work. Yeah. So just tell us a little bit about that so people have, we can pre-order it.
Yeah. There's a book coming out called The Rose that is from the first iteration. It was edited together with Libby Warble and Sarah Miller-Meigs and myself. That includes, extended captions, didactics about each of the artists. So it's a very informational book to understand who these artists are. And then there's 6 of the artists who are also writers who have written essays in it about the act of collage. And Carla Williams wrote a beautiful introduction for the book about the rose itself.
And that will be...
It's distributed through DAP, and it's coming out at the end of this month.
Oh, that's really exciting. I think people can pre-order it. So
yes,
The Rose, and I think they can pre-order it through the Lumber Room, I think. But I'll find out specifically, and I'll clean that up in the intro to the show. So
thank you, Sasha.
People to support that, of course. So Marina and Justine, thank you both so much for spending time with me today. This was so fun and really loved talking with both of you, and folks come up and see the show. And and Justine and Marina, thank you both. Not that I'm in a position to thank you, but I'll do it anyway, for being such incredible mentors and just such beautiful parts of our wonderful community. It's really just, I don't know, as someone who's in it, and I feel a lot of what you feel, Justine, that it's like, it's just such a blessing to be a part of it, and to
for sure
get to work with such wonderful people and be nourished by, other people sharing their inner workings and their passions. And so thank you both so much.
Thank you, Sasha, for all the work you do.
Thank you, Sasha, for having us. This has been wonderful.
A pleasure. Marina, I'm sure I'll see you sometime this week, because I'll be over at CPW.
I'll see you soon.
And Justine, until we meet again.
Yes.
Take care.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye, you guys.
Bye.
PhotoWork with Sasha Wolf is a production of the PhotoWork Foundation. Executive producer is Sasha Wolf, and the associate producer is Taylor Selsback. The show is also produced and edited by me, Michael Chauvin-Dalton of Real Photo Show. Music is by J. Walter Hawks. If you like the show and wish to find out more about the Foundation, please visit photowork.foundation and be sure to subscribe and review with all the stars on your listening platform.